With the acoustic guitar, it's Rosette around the Soundhole is the focus point for everything. It's the first thing you see. Collectors look there first, buyers and players, and it's a place where you get to have a little fun in designing something and putting it in there, and it's a hard job. This is a guitar top made by my friend at StewMac and a co-worker who's been building guitars a long time, and he made this Soundhole ring, the Rosette. No matter if you made the Rosette yourself or bought it off the shelf, that's only half the battle. You still have to get it into the spruce top without any gaps, any holes, tear out, punctures and the like. And we're going to show you how to do that in this video. He's got his own method of doing this that I'd never seen, and it's really great. I'm looking forward to this because I've only built a couple acoustic guitars and always had trouble putting the rosettes in.
Yeah, it's actually can be a little bit tricky to get everything in there and fit nice and tight because you don't want any gaps. One of the keys to this is starting with 2 workboards, because we're actually going to work on both of these at the same time. 2 pieces of plywood with a sheet of laminate on the top, 2x2 square, and then I measured down 8 inches and centered a pin, which is 3/16 of an inch, which matches our tool, which essentially is our rosette cutting jig, you know, which also has the plunge base and the Dremel on it. So this is going to be the tool that we're going to use to cut all this with. And we are going to use this to measure out exactly where we need to be for the outside dimension of our rosette. And then we're going to come over and we're going to cut our rosewood. We're going to come back and measure the inside of the ring, come back and cut our rosewood. And then if we do this exactly right, everything should drop right into the channel and fit nice and tight.
Which one of those is the Soundhole ring?
So essentially what we have here is this is the sound hole that'll get cut out. So this part will be removed. And then these 2 lines here will be where we are going to cut for the rosette material.
Cocobolo.
Cocobolo.
And this is scrap wood, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you know, I don't throw anything away. This had been at one point the shape of a guitar, but you know, you flip these around and join these, and you've got more than enough material for rosette. So we're going to start by taping down this piece of cocobolo onto our workboard.
Let's do it.
You want to apply plenty of tape to the back of the piece of rosewood so it doesn't move. It's absolutely critical that this stays rock solid while we're cutting this out. The next thing we're going to do is look at the bit that we have in our cutter. This whole method hinges on one basic idea. And that is that the bit that we use to cut the channels is exactly the same width as our purfling. That'll mean when we cut the channel, the purfling will fit right down in with no problems. But it's always smart to do a test cut. You can see on my workboard that I've made quite a few test cuts to make sure everything's right. Once you get your cut made, you want to stick your purfling down in there, and you want it to fit nice and tight. You don't want it to be so tight that you just have to stuff it in. You want it to be a comfortable fit, but tight. I'm pretty happy with the way that fits. Before we make our first cut in the cocobolo, we need to set the cutter to the outside dimension of our rosette. Once we get it exactly where we want it, we can start by making just a tiny test cut to see if we got it where we want it. And it's always a good idea to do your test fittings up here at the top, because ultimately the fingerboard is going to come down and it's going to cover all this up. If you look, right there, you can see my test cut. I've taken most of the line, but not all of the line, so I'm pretty happy with where that's at. Now that we know what our outside dimension is, we're going to take the trimmer and we're going to move over to the other workboard for our first cut. Because the cocobolo is so hard, we want to make sure that we take just a small bite at a time, and we don't cut too much because this bit is really, really small and it doesn't take much to break it. Quite a bit of dust building up, so I'm just going to take the cutter off. Keep the cutter from overheating. As you notice, I'm seeing either some of the tape coming up or I'm seeing some of the laminate from that board underneath. I don't want to take too much of a bite, cutting and then giving a little relief, and cutting and giving a little relief. Okay, that's exactly what I did not want to happen. I just broke the bit. And there it is, right there. You see it laying right in there. That happens with this method because we're making small cuts. We're going deep in a material. It's tough to not let that happen, but it's just part of the trade, so we're just gonna take our lumps and move on. If you look, I either see the white of the board below or I can see where I've actually cut into the laminate top a little bit, which is exactly what we want. Before we take the trimmer off and come over and cut our channel in the spruce, we need to set the depth for our purfling. So I'm going to start by cutting off a little piece of the purfling just so I've got something smaller to work with. So just set the purfling on top of the pin, bring the other one down to meet it. Once I have that in place, I just tighten it from behind. So right now, if I plunge my cutter to this depth, I'm going to be all the way in on the purfling. I don't want to be all the way in. I want to be about 2/3 or maybe a little bit more. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the fine control to be just a little bit less. Now I've got about 3/4 of it in there, maybe a little less. That should be just about where I want to go. Take the cutter and we're going to move it over to the spruce. We shouldn't have to move anything. We've got our depth stop in place. Just like we took light, shallow cuts on the cocobolo, we want to take light, shallow cuts on the spruce too. This is a softer wood and it'll cut okay. But the problem is that when we get into the straight parts of the grain, we can sometimes get tear out. It'll change the shape of the hole a little bit. So we just want to take light cuts to make sure that everything is as perfect as we can get it. Okay, we're final depth. We're going to take some 320 sandpaper and we just want to very gently cut those fuzzies off without changing the top of that channel at all. So the next thing we're going to do is pre-fit a piece of our purfling and cut it approximately to size. So when we're installing everything, we've already got this done. We basically just take our purfling and we insert it into the channel all the way around. Back out come the trusty thread-in nippers. It's not critical that these two things are a perfect fit right at the top because again, the fingerboard is going to come in and cover this up. So that's our outside ring. Now it's time to cut the inside of our rosette ring. The reason why we cut the outside ring first was because you can see with the pin that all this material is still connected. On this cut, when we cut through, the ring is going to be loose. The only thing that's going to be holding this ring in place is that tape, and this can't move at all. That's why we spent so much time and taped this down so tightly. So let's get going. So we're going to adjust the trimmer, loosen the bolt in the center that basically holds everything down. Clockwise is tighter. Make a little test cut. This looks like it's going to be a good fit. Now we're going to come over and we're going to cut the cocobolo, just like we did before. Try not to break our bit this time. Okay, there's our inside ring. Now we'll just do what we did before and adjust the depth of the cutter to about 3/4 of the purfling. So now we're going to come back over and we're going to cut the spruce. So we're going to insert our inside ring and cut that. Okay, there we go. To set the ring depth, one of the things that's easy to do is just cut off a little piece of the material that the rosette's cut out of, and we can use that to set our depth stop on our router. Okay. So I switched the cutter, in this case out to an 80 thousandths cutter. It doesn't matter what you use, anything thicker is fine. Just like how we set the purfling, we want to set the depth just a little bit shallower. So I'll use the fine adjustment so just a little bit of it's poking out. Make a test cut. So that looks good. We're not touching our outside purfling line. It's taking plenty of material. We're good to go. Okay, and now we're just going to creep out till we run into the other purfling channel. Okay, and that's our channel. And now I have to very carefully remove the rosette ring. I'm going to start by taking the outside material off first, basically prying up this cocobolo. Then very carefully loosen the ring from the workboard. They love to break, and it's not atypical for this to break at least in one place, which isn't a problem. What's more challenging is if it breaks in two places, then you gotta hide it, and then that gets a lot harder. All right, got the ring off without breaking it. Now we gotta get the rest of the tape off and the stickiness off. Now we're gonna use a little naphtha and clean the rest of it off. And just go around the edge a little bit too, to make sure there's no tape residue stuck to the outside edges. There we are.
How we doing, pal?
Like we're getting there, buddy. We got the ring cut, channels cut, purflings are cut. So now I'm just gonna make a little incision in this so I can scooch it around while I'm putting the purfling in, and we can check and see what our fit looks like. Now I'm gonna cut it right on the vertical grain, and it just makes life a little easier to get it into the channel.
Be careful.
Yeah, don't want to break it now. Check our purflings, make sure we got the right one on the inside and the right one on the outside.
Here comes the moment of truth, is what we're calling it.
It's feeling snug.
You got it.
Yeah, looking good.
What if it's too tight? Then what do you do?
Yeah, you know, if it all goes in there and it's going in so tight that, you know, you think you're either not going to get it out or it's going to be to potentially break it to pull it out, I'll just take everything back out and I'll seal the rosette channel and maybe a little area around it with shellac. You can either use the stuff out of a spray can or you can use like a 1 pound cut, because what you don't want is you don't want super glue getting into the end grain of the spruce because it'll discolor it. And then after the shellac dries, put the pieces back in, and then right on top of the rosewood, come in here and put a little bit of number 10 super glue, and the capillary action will just pull it down underneath of it, and it'll just firm everything right up, and it'll be nice and snug and tight. My preferred method is to use Titebond if I can.
But you can't here.
But I can, and definitely here because it went in pretty easy. Make sure we got plenty of glue in the channel. Again, part of the reason why I like this glue is that the water in it makes the woods swell. It just gives you a little bit tighter fit. Also, the wetness of it helps ease everything into the channel so it goes in nice and smooth. Okay, start with the outside ring, outside purfling, inside purfling. And then if you just take your finger, just kind of let it seat itself all the way around. You want to make sure it's seated down in the bottom of the channel the best you can get it. And it does tend to like to lift out of there, so you kind of have to keep an eye on it while you're gluing up. We'll start with a little dry cleanup first. Then we'll come back and just do a little bit of damp cleanup just to get the worst of it off. And when it's wet like this will be pretty much what the color will be under finish. So it has that nice red rosewoody kind of look that cocobolo likes to show. Now we're going to take a piece of wax paper and slip it over the pin. And we're going to take a caul, which is a piece of wood with a hole drilled in it. Set it on top, take something heavy, this granite surface plate, and that's it. We're going to let's let it sit until it dries.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Here's some fresh iced tea from Joan.
Thanks, Dan.
Do you want lemon?
No, I'm good, but thank you.
So, using 2 workboards, index pins, a setup of a Dremel tool, a Plunge router base, and the Soundhole and Rosette routing jig, Brock inlaid this without a flaw. That rosette is tight as a drum, there's no gaps. And now he'll use the same setup to cut out the Soundhole. A perfect job, and thank you, Brock.